friends, Sarah here. Let's make something that you probably eat all of the time and also something that you've probably never made before or even thought to make before. Crackers. So it's very easy and pretty quick. First, we've got a medium-sized bowl and a cup of flour. Now I'm using whole wheat flour today. And we're going to have to adjust the flour to liquid measure just because our starters may be different, wateriness, or the flour that we're using might be all-purpose flour. So all-purpose flour absorbs water differently than whole wheat flour does, and it's fine because I'm just going to show you the texture that you're looking for. You can use either one. You're just going to have to maybe add a little bit of water or add a little bit more flour. It's totally cool. So today I've got whole wheat flour and a quarter cup of butter. So it's a substitute. You can use whatever butter you wish. And what I'll do first is mix it in with my hands. So this butter is at room temperature. My hands are clean. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squish the butter in between my fingers, and we're making little pieces out of it. So we're just incorporating the butter into the flour, into little tiny pea-sized pieces. This is similar to if you were making biscuits or pie crust, although when I make biscuits and pie crust, I prefer to use either a fork or two knives to cut the butter in, or even better, a pastry cutter, because that way the butter won't get too melty and change the texture of the biscuit or pie crust. But hey, that's just me. So it's going to become kind of mealy looking. Yeah. Sandy. And that's what you're going for. So once you've got it all kind of that sandy texture, it doesn't take long, especially if the butter is softened to room temperature, which is exactly what you want. Kind of dust your fingers off. Now I'm going to add, ooh, it smells good. I'm going to add herbs to this. Now you don't have to add any herbs to your crackers, but I had a friend make me rosemary olive oil crackers once in a dream. It was wild. So I'm going to make those in honor of her. So in my little tiny mortar here, I've got, because I crushed up some rosemary, I've got 2 tablespoons of dried rosemary. And I also have just a few cranks of black pepper and a half a teaspoon of salt. So that's going to go in. Mix that around a bit. Now you could use whatever seasonings you want to. Maybe you've got a seasoning blend that's sitting in your pantry and you don't know what the hey to use it for. This would probably be a good application for it. Just watch to see if it contains salt, and if it does, you just might want to lower that amount of salt. You know, if you were a cheese eater, you could totally put some like Parmesan cheese in this too. These are your crackers. You can do whatever the hey you want with them. So I'm going to pour in our starter now. So these are sourdough crackers. And I've got a cup. So we'll just mix that right in. And we'll stir it up. See if we need any more flour or maybe perhaps some water. All we're doing here is looking for a specific texture, okay? So I think we're going to need just a hair more flour. And I'm going to get my hand into it so that I will show you exactly why we need more flour. See, we want this to be kind of a stiff dough. It's quite sticky. So I'm going to sprinkle on some all-purpose flour because why not? These are my crackers. And I'm going to just start to knead a little bit in the bowl. You know I love to knead in the bowl. Now, these crackers are going to rest for at least a half hour, maybe up to 2 hours, or, it could be a couple days. just in the fridge. No worries. If you do let it sit in the fridge for longer, you might have to knead it, or at least incorporate a little bit more flour when you're rolling them out later. But you know, you'll know what to look for. If the dough gives you fits, then just add some more flour. All right, so I'm pleased with the texture it is right now. It's starting to be more of a ball. It's kind of got that yeast dough feel to it because of the sourdough starter that's into it, and that sourdough starter contains a lot of gluten, you know, so all that gluten has been activated with the water and the flour and the time that is sat out. All right, so I'm pleased. I'm just going to let it hang out in this bowl. I'm going to put a lid on this, and then I'm just going to put it in the fridge. And then we'll come back to it in a little bit, and we'll start rolling out our crackers. So our dough is chilled for about a half hour or so, and it hasn't changed much, which is to be expected. And it's firmed up a little bit, so what's happened is the butter has chilled and cooled, and so also the gluten has relaxed so that we won't be fighting our dough when we roll it out. So what I'll do first is just sprinkle a light coat of flour on a clean surface. And then I like to work with my dough in smaller pieces, so I'm going to cut it into thirds, or you can cut it into quarters, or however you wish. And I've got my oven preheating to 350. I'm going to put 2 of these in the bowl, and then we'll work with just one piece at a time. And I will show you a couple ways you can do this. So, just as we treated our cinnamon rolls, we floured the surface, we floured both sides, and we've got our rolling pin, and we need to get these really, really thin, because if you don't roll them thin enough, then they're just going to be kind of soft and bread-like, and they won't have that like cracker snap. You know, there's a reason why crackers are called crackers. Make that like cracking sound, right? So when we get it, you know, reasonably thin, we're going to transfer it to some parchment paper. Now, of course, you don't have to have parchment paper. It's totally an option. You could just put it on a greased baking tray. So I can tell my dough is sticking to the counter because it's not moving in the center. Oh, also, hey, you know, you could be as particular as you wanted to get it like all nice and rectangle-y, and that's all good and well. But I don't live that life. I mean, sometimes I live that life, but most of the time I don't. So here's, it's quite thin. It's not quite as thin as we want it yet. It is probably 1/8 of an inch. We want it half that, right? So let me get my parchment. This might make terrible sounds. I'm very sorry if it does. So we're just gonna slap it on the parchment and roll it from here. That way we can just transfer this piece of parchment with the crackers on it to our baking sheet. So now I've also got a guideline here, so I know the parameters in which I'm working. And, you know, paper moves, which is annoying, but I just poke the end of it against the counter to overhang, and then I just lean up against it. That's my problem solving here. All right. Really thin, super thin, paper thin. I bet you, and you know the way that they used to make crackers in oldie-timey days, to get it thin enough you could read a piece of, like read a book or a newspaper underneath it. That's how thin you wanted them. Because they made their own crackers. It was nice to have with soup and whatnot. Alright, so I'm pleased. I find this thin enough. And honestly, you're gonna really enjoy the end result of these, especially when you put your own elbow grease into it. So now here is the time where you get to get creative if you want to, cutting them into whatever kind of shapes you want. you could be very particular and you could get a ruler out and just like use your ruler and a pizza cutter or something or other and just make those perfectly square or perfectly diamond crackers. But you know what? Life's short sometimes. And so I'm just going to just lightly score. And also, I don't know where the pizza cutter is, and I find this deeply troubling. But just, it doesn't have to be deeply cut. You don't have to like go gung-ho on the paper. We want the paper to be intact, right? We're just cutting through the crackers. Now, some suggest that you take away the edge pieces because they will cook faster, and they will. But again, these are crackers. And the cook can eat those first, right? Before anyone sees them, and they won't even know. This is the advantage of being the cook. All right, so another step if you want is to dock them. And what that means is we're just gonna poke some holes on the crackers to allow steam to come out. I don't know why it's called docking, but that's what it's called. You would do this sometimes to pie crusts that were pre-baked. You know, this is optional. If you don't mind puffy crackers, you know, you just don't do this. It's fine. Next thing I'm gonna do is sprinkle some, well, drizzle some olive oil over it, because these are rosemary olive oil crackers. I'm gonna get a brush it around. Now, even if you don't choose to have olive oil crackers, you do wanna spray them for a couple of reasons. They'll be nice and golden brown. And then also it allows the salt to stick on them. So I'm also going to sprinkle some salt on the surface because crackers, right? Salty, good. Oh goodness. And again, this is up to you. And that's that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this to my baking sheet and I'm going to pop them into the oven. It's already preheated at 350 degrees. And then we'll come back and see what they look like. So most of them are done. Inevitably, always the edges, the outside pieces will be done beforehand. And so I've taken the middle squares and I've combined them onto one tray and I've put them back into the oven so that they can finish baking for a few more minutes. What I did in my baking process is 10 minutes into baking, I switched the trays and then I also flipped each tray 180 so that they could bake evenly, and then I bake another for another 10 minutes. I checked them, needed another few minutes, and then I pulled them out and then took all the edge pieces off. So this is what they look like when they're done. Super cute, right? Again, you can make them whatever shape you want. And then you'll get these weird pieces, which can go straight into the cook's mouth, right? But yeah, ooh, listen, right? Crackers. It's so fun. Now, you don't have to have an oven to bake crackers. I wanted to show you how you can make these big rustic style crackers in a skillet. So what I did is I just preheated a cast iron skillet. You can use whatever skillet you want. Just, we don't even need any oil. We'll just roll it super, super thin. Slap the dough in there, kind of straighten it out because it will wrinkle somewhat. And then, you know, you oil it, you salt it. I had too much salt, but next time, listen. Yeah, so I'm very pleased. And this is a really fun way of presenting crackers too. Like imagine these in a napkin-lined basket at the table. Cool, huh? So I hope you give it a try. They're very easy. Now all you need to do to store them is make sure they cool completely, then stick them in an airtight container and you're good to go. They keep for a very long time. So enjoy. I hope to catch you for the next recipe.